don't trust the New York Times to tell you?
I don't even follow New York Times. I'm somewhere between, but not because I like them, but because they are most practical for quick news, just to get what is going on. And here we are more used to CNN and Guardian in Europe. But I'm not saying absolutely not. They are the best. But
is there any value to an organization that is gathering news and then telling you each day, this is important? We have the brightest people in our newsroom, and we believe. I'm not aware of it. You don't think that there's any value to like a BBC?
Probably no. Probably it is. I'm not saying there is not. I'm just saying that I am not aware. If you have a suggestion that there is a domain or whatever website where you click that and you learn all that is really important, I would like to know it. No?
The comment section on Pornhub for me always gets me through the
Pornhub, but how can you skip the other part of? I mean,
he only goes there to read the comments.
Now you are a dirty old man. What I mean is that if they catch you looking at naked women or whatever is there, you say, I'm really just for the news there. They have the best comment section.
Comment section, you can't beat it.
I must say, many people, but sincerely, they were not lying, were telling me that in Playboy 30 years ago and more, they had quite good long interviews and so on. Yes. It wasn't all bullshit.
There's an interview with Thomas Pynchon from like a Playboy from the early 70s that I read for the articles.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And the review section in Hustler was magnificent. I'm kidding. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I really enjoyed it, and keep in touch. Even with you, Russell, and Ben, my two greatest enemies, we still keep in touch. Okay.
All right. My name is Ben Burgis. I am joined, as always, Kelly is off tonight, but I'm joined, as always, by our graphic designer, J. Andrew World, and our producer, Kale. Wait, where's Kale? Did something happen to Kale? Oh, Jake Abbott. That's right. So Kale will be back many times as a guest, but the regular producer is now Jake Abbott. And in the post game for patrons, you could hear all about his origin story. But say hi to everybody, Jake.
Hey, I just found out that I'm going to be doing my origin story, so I'm excited for that. I'm going to have to figure out what to say. Thanks for having me on. Excited for my first episode.
So the voice you heard in Cold Open was, of course, the world's second most famous Slovenian, Slavoj Žižek, maybe third now that there's Luka, but declaring me to be his bitter enemy. But despite our newfound status as bitter enemies, Slavoj is going to be back on this show in November, a little preview of coming attractions there. Tonight, though, we've got somebody who isn't from Slovenia at all, not from any part of Slovenia, David Griscom. And more on that and what we're going to be exploring with David in a few minutes. Meanwhile, though, there are a couple things that merit quick mentions. The first is that I'm going to be teaching another online course at Michael Albert's School for Social and Cultural Change. This one is called Analytic Marxism and the Materialist Theory of History. We're going to be reading G.A. Cohen's great book, Karl Marx's Theory of History and Defense, which is a very clearly written and very rigorous book, but, is also pretty densely packed. And if you've ever wanted to read it or you started to, and you want to pick back up, I think this is a good chance to read it in the best circumstances. The class, we're going to go through it together. Everybody can help each other out. So that's going to be in October and November, but enrollment is open now. Head over to sscc.teachable.com if you want to sign up for the class, which again is going to be in October and November, but you can sign up right now. Again, that is sscc.teachable.com. So the other thing that I wanted to mention is that I'm going to be in New York this weekend. I would have organized some big public thing, like maybe even a GTAA live show. But things are still a little ambiguous with the Delta variant and whatnot as far as people going to events. So that's going to have to wait. Meanwhile, though, while I am in town, a group called the Gotham Atheists asked if I'd be the guest at their monthly meetup. A little odd, I know, that it's that and not some more directly political thing. But it does make some sense. I did a debate with Douglas Wilson a while back about whether atheism is immoral, so maybe it's not quite as random as it might seem. Jake, do we have the clip from that debate?
We do.
Cool.
All right. Thank you, James. Thank you, Pastor Douglas, for doing this. Before I start with the main line of argument, I want to clear up one possible source of confusion. I'm an atheist, obviously, and I'm here to defend the moral honor of atheism. But what I'm not is an anti-theist. I'm not here to besmirch the moral honor of theism. In fact, even though I'm an atheist and more than enough of a philosophy nerd to thoroughly enjoy arguing about topics like theism versus atheism, in the past, I've largely avoided this topic in public debates like this for the simple reason that I spend most of my time arguing about politics, and I don't want to give anyone who knows me from those contexts the impression that there's an anti-theistic component to what I advocate politically. There isn't. While I'm an atheist, and I clearly don't think that my being an atheist puts me at any sort of disadvantage in talking about morality, which is what we'll be discussing tonight, I deeply admire the Christian left, figures like Tony Benn or Cornel West, or just to pick a third progressive Christian at random, my wife, Jennifer Burgis. So that's not the point, right? I think that people like Robert E. Lee, who fought for what I regard as the most evil cause in human history, was a Christian, but so was John Brown.
So there you go. So this is, I should clarify, I'm not going to be giving a speech or anything. It's just a social event. People should certainly feel free to come hang out, even if they aren't that hot and bothered one way or the other by the whole atheism and religion subject. It's outdoors, so it's something a lot more people are comfortable with doing, even while Delta's going on, dinner and drinks in the park kind of thing. So it's at the corner of Broadway and 23rd on Friday the 17th at 8 p.m. So if anyone will, watching or listening, wants to come by and, and chat a bit, hang out, always more than happy to do that. Final thing I wanted to mention before we get into the meat of this opening segment is that I have 2 articles out in Jacobin since the last episode. One of them is a review of the HBO Obama documentary, which is, good Lord, 5 hours of the most vapid kind of lip shit imaginable. But I watched it, so you don't have to. That's called HBO's new Obama documentary is Apolitical Propaganda, which is probably a lot nicer than I would have said if I picked the title. The other one has to do with the withdrawal of U.S. forces from Afghanistan. Earlier today, I was watching Friend of the Show. I know when I say that, I'm usually being shitty, like, friend of the show, Ben Shapiro. But in this case, I actually mean it. She's been a repeated guest and we like her. I was watching Crystal Ball on Breaking Points, and she said something not just about Afghanistan, but about the whole, larger history of, the war on terror as it's played out in the last 2 decades, that I thought was extraordinarily well put. Do we have that clip?
It is such a crime that has been committed to this country, what has been done to these people, the surveillance that was justified, the breach of civil liberties that will never be rolled back that was justified by all of this, the complete destabilization of an entire region, the fact that we made ourselves so much less safe. We helped to generate new terrorist groups. We made the Taliban more powerful than they've ever been before.
ISIS.
That's the real legacy. And every year when 9/11 rolls around, I think to myself, if we had done nothing in response, we would have been infinitely better off. And the world would have been infinitely better off than the actions that George W. Bush caused us to take.
Yeah, there you go. I thought that was extraordinarily well said. And of course, the 20 years of bloodshed in Afghanistan is one of the worst aspects of what Crystal was talking about there. Just 2 decades of nonstop brutality and human misery, with the end result of replacing the Taliban with a more powerful version of the Taliban. I may be an atheist, but Jesus Christ, thank God that's over. Naturally, lots of mainstream media pundits don't see it that way because, hellscape, etc. So, for example, we have the Eli Lake tweet. So, yeah, it's the one only Eli Lake says he's making fun of people who called Afghanistan a forever war. He says, end the forever war in Okinawa, Germany, and South Korea. Come home, America. I know we've got another tweet from one of these ghouls, saying, basically the same thing. Here we go. Patrick Ruffini, he says the United States must immediately withdraw from all these countries because if we leave any troops, it's a forever war. And then he's got this little chart that shows distribution of American troops around the world. The largest part is in Japan, and it's Germany after that, and South Korea is a distant, third place. And basically, 2 points about all of this in the article. So the first is, no, for God's sake, it is not exactly the same thing. It would be exactly the same thing if, the U.S. troop presence in Germany was to prop up, Angela Merkel's regime as it fought for its life against an insurgency that already controlled like most of Bavaria and parts of Saxony. That is not the situation. So no, it is in fact much worse to keep troops in Afghanistan in an active war zone, propping up a government that would last 2 seconds without us, than it would be to keep troops in these other places. But also, too, unironically, yeah, Eli, that should happen. We should, in fact, not have forever bases in all of these places. It is absurd and obscene that the United States maintains, this permanent imperial military presence and, hundreds of bases, spread out across the entire planet. There's no, major region that doesn't have something. And there's absolutely no reason we should have this. It does not, in fact, make the world safer. It makes the world less safe because it's a belligerent posture. It's something that makes it easier for the United States to start wars elsewhere. Like, Germany, for example, was opposed to the war in Iraq diplomatically, but U.S. bases in Germany sure played a big role as a stop-off point for planes, going over with weapons to Iraq and coming back with wounded soldiers to be treated there. It's a huge money drain, of cash that we could spend on domestic social programs. Lots of people in Okinawa, for example, have lots of reasons to resent U.S. presence there. I'm not saying everything could be folded up like overnight. I think like in Korea, it should be tied to a diplomatic process to end the sort of remnants of the Korean War. But for God's sake, if you don't have as part of your political program that we should not permanently be maintaining all of this political presence, then yeah, I think you're not serious about the United States no longer being an empire. So any thoughts about this, guys?
I just have to say, part of my origin story, since, to get Jake ready for his later, but my grandfather actually served in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. He was a cook during Vietnam and was on Okinawa for at least 8 years. That's where my father kind of grew up there. So, and then after my father got out of the military, he built Hellfire missiles. So, anyways, long story short, there. It's just a continual thing, and to still hear we're in wars of like my grandfather who passed away years ago, and still actively there, years and years after that war was finished, and we're still using Hellfire missiles, stuff that my father was working on 40 years ago. That kind of tells you a lot about the just not just the endless war, but the capitalism really doesn't create innovation.
Yeah, Jake.
All I would add, well, my father's a lawyer in New Jersey, so it's not we can go more into the backstory later. Not as relevant, but it definitely is. It's always funny when these conservative ghouls kind of accidentally make the opposite point that they think they're making, and it seems to happen with more frequency than it should, right? Like almost like they're openly mocking us. I can't tell.
Yeah. Oh, so I guess if you had your way, we would just not have this network of hundreds of military bases around the world, and we would spend money on butter instead of guns. I mean, I guess, God.
I mean, it sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah, don't threaten me with a good time. All right. Well, I apologize to everybody in the GTA Slack group over the weekend that I was going to do this to you, but today's episode is going to be, other than the brand new philosophy segment at the end with the aforementioned Jennifer Burgis, the rest of the episode is going to be a trip to America's finest institution of higher learning, Prager University. This is a slightly abusive thing that I'm doing to you guys, but we're gonna, and David later, but we're gonna do it. Do we have the first of the Prager U videos that we were gonna watch today?
Yeah. Which was the first one we wanted to?
The capitalism and socialism.
Yes.
There we go.
Maybe we should vamp.
Socialism. We can sum up each economic system in one line. Capitalism is based on human greed. Socialism is based on human need, right? No, wrong, so wrong. It's exactly backwards. And I'll prove it to you. Been on Amazon lately? Each of the thousands of products Amazon offers represents the work of people who believe they have something you want or need. If they're right, they prosper. If they're wrong, they don't. That's how the free market works. It encourages people to improve their lives by satisfying the needs of others. No one starts a business making a thing or providing a service for themselves. They start a business to make things or provide services for others. I speak from personal experience. When I was the CEO of the company that owns Carl's Jr. and Hardee's restaurant chains, we spent millions of dollars every year trying to determine what customers wanted. If our customers didn't like something, we changed it, and fast. Because if we didn't, our competitors would, pun intended, eat us for lunch. The consumer, that's you, has the ultimate power. In effect, you vote with every dollar you spend. In a socialist economy, the government has the ultimate power. It decides what you get from a limited supply it decides should exist. Instead of millions of people making millions of decisions about what they want, a few people, government elites, decide what people should have and how much they should pay for it. Not surprisingly, they always get it wrong. Have you ever noticed that late-stage socialist failures always run out of essential items like toilet paper? Of course, this isn't a problem for those who have the right connections with the right people. Those chosen few get whatever they want, but everyone else is out of luck.
Don't worry.
Venezuela, once the richest country in South America, is the most recent example of socialism driving a prosperous country into an economic ditch. Now, maybe you think it's an unfair example. I'm not sure why, but okay. We'll ignore the fact that leftist activists celebrated it as a great socialist success right up until it wasn't. But what about Western European countries? Don't they have socialist economies? People seem pretty happy there. Why can't we have what they have? Free healthcare, free college, stronger unions. Good question, and the answer may surprise you. There are no socialist countries in Western Europe. Most are just as capitalist as the United States. The only difference, and it's a big one, is that they offer more government benefits than the US does. We can argue about the cost of these benefits and the point at which they reduce individual initiative, thus doing more harm than good. Scandinavians have been debating those questions for years, but only a free market capitalist economy can produce the wealth necessary to sustain all of the supposedly free stuff Europeans enjoy. To get the free stuff, after all, you have to create enough wealth to generate enough tax revenue to pay for everything the government gives away. Without capitalism, you're Venezuela. In a 2015 speech at Harvard, Denmark's prime minister took great pains to make this point. I know that some people in the US associate the Nordic model with socialism. Therefore, I would like to make one thing clear. Denmark is far from a socialist planned economy. Denmark is a market economy. So when you point to Denmark as a paragon of socialism, you're really singing the praises of capitalism. The more capitalism, the less socialism you need. Look at America since 2017. A policy of lower taxes and less government regulation, that's more capitalism, has led to a robust economic expansion, something thought impossible just a few years earlier. Unemployment, notably among minority groups, typically most at risk for poverty, is at a generational low. Economic expansion gets people off welfare and into work. That's less socialism. None of this requires a degree in economics. Common sense is all you need. That's why it's so frustrating to see young people praising socialism and criticizing capitalism. It's bad enough that they're working against their own interests, better job prospects, better wages, personal freedom. But they're also working against the interest of the less fortunate. Capitalism leads to economic democracy. Socialism leads to the economic dictatorship of the elite, always and everywhere. So beware what you ask for. You just might get it. I'm Andy Puzder, the author of The Capitalist Comeback for Prager University.
Yeah. We're going to say
gold.
Yeah.
Absolute comedy gold. I mean, yeah, capitalism does such a great job keeping us stocked with toilet paper.
Yeah, especially
this came out before 2020.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I reviewed I co-wrote Nathan Robinson a review of Glenn Beck's book, Argue with Socialists, for Current Affairs last summer. And like a hilarious thing at the end of that book is that in singing the praises of capitalism, he's talking about how life is so much better than it was 100 years ago. And two of the things he mentions are the Spanish flu and toilet paper shortages, which of course, at that point, the United States was dealing with because of supply chain issues that do in fact have a lot to do with profit incentives. There was no American Gosh plan doing bad, economic planning to make the toilet paper run out when the pandemic started. But yeah, I mean, I guess the two things that immediately come to mind for me about this one are one, there's that awesome double standard where he's talking about Venezuela and Western Europe, says, well, look, socialism means Venezuela, and for some reason, socialists don't like it when we talk about Venezuela, but I mean, that's clearly what it means. And on the one hand, well, there's nothing socialist about Western Europe. And at this point, we did the first, formerly Sunday night debate breakdowns, but we did the first Thursday night one last Thursday. And Jake brought up that classic meme, with the two guys yelling at each other. And one of them is, socialism is awesome. Look at, whatever it was, Sweden. And the other guy says, oh, well, that's not socialism. That's just capitalism with social welfare policies. And so the first guy says, great. Can we have capitalism with social welfare policies? The first one says, no, that would be socialism. And that's definitely the vibe I get from this video, because at the height of Hugo Chavez's welfare state, you can look this up, the proportion of Venezuelans employed, sorry, I think I froze up for a second. At the height of Hugo Chavez's welfare state, the proportion of Venezuelans employed by the public sector was actually lower than the proportion of French people employed by the public sector. And much lower than the percentages in the Nordic countries. So if the various European countries that are social democratic success stories aren't socialist, then Venezuela is even less socialist. I mean, I think the real story there is that it's so if you're in the imperial backyard in Latin America, tried to achieve even very mild social democratic reforms puts you on a collision course, with certainly the United States and also local elites, and none of this is to deny the existence of incompetence or mismanagement, within especially after Chavez died and Maduro took over, but like clearly you can't blame the public sector being too big. They're being like, I like, even if you don't want to define socialism as like workers control the means of production, even if you just want to define it as state ownership, and you want to talk that way, that comes in degrees. It's not just binary. Well, if so, France is still more socialist than Venezuela does. So I think the way he's trying to have it both ways there doesn't really make sense. You guys have thoughts?
Most of my thoughts are just completely blown out because I'm just like there's just so much, Sorry, there's just so like he just kept going like a rapid pace and he's saying so much about everything and so little about Sorry about that.
Yeah.
We have that together. Jake, you got anything? Jump in.
Well, I mean, it's definitely not the first time in which I've seen socialist states just defined by which ones are either mismanaged or like you mentioned are suffer from circumstances outside of their control, right? But all that said, I mean, I guess it's interesting. I've never really watched this stuff because of, I think, the lack of a desire to torture myself. But it is. I remember when we were talking about our debate with Charlie Kirk and his son, we were talking about creating this narrative, and it is slickly produced, and I could see how it is creating a viable narrative better than even Charlie was able to. During the debate. So it's interesting to think about, how to counter that. How to counter that narrative.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, the part about Lars Rasmussen that really gets me. I mean, we were talking about this a little bit so I'm getting my own crack at Charlie at the beginning of October in Arizona. So we were watching the Charlie Kirk Hassan Piker debate last Thursday. There's no Thursday night debate breakdown this Thursday because I'm going to be on my way to New York, but also no regular episode on Monday because I'll be coming back. We'll do some kind of stream on Tuesday so people don't have to wait too long. And we'll be doing a couple Thursdays. We'll be doing the Vosh Charlie Kirk one. But one of the things that we were talking about, I think, while talking about the Charlie Kirk Hassan Piker debate, is that you really see this sort of weird assumption all the time when right wingers talk about the Nordics. And I mean, to be fair, this PragerU video did less of it, right? Because there was at least a passing mention of the existence of debates about these things in various European countries. Usually they do this weird shit, like they'll say, "Oh, Sweden realized that such and such program wasn't working, and they had to roll it back," as if this were just like this collective, like the Swedish hive mind had just made this technocratic determination, and this wasn't a result of ideological struggle and like right-wing parties winning and carrying out their policies. But I think you do see that like Nordic hive mind assumption a little bit when he brings up Lars Rasmussen, because yeah, sure, there's this like center-right head of state who doesn't want to associate the popular programs in his country with socialism. No shit. I mean, that's like that'd be like if you said, well, like the equivalent would be saying, well, Bernie Sanders says such and such about the relationship between Social Security and socialism, and just taking that as decisive. Bernie Sanders said it. This is the mirror universe version of that. Lars Rasmussen says that there's nothing socialist about this stuff, and of course, it's not. I mean, because these are still fundamentally capitalist economies. No doubt. That workers certainly don't run their own workplaces, etc. But also, though, these extensive social democratic welfare states, these did not come out. These did not just like emerge from the hive mind of Nordic culture. These came about as a result of really fierce class struggle, and like really militant industrial unions allied with labor and socialist parties, over the course of a very long period of time. These are hard-won gains, and if you talk to a Danish socialist, of which there are very many, of various shades and degrees of radicalism, instead of talking to Lars Rasmussen, you get a very different story. But we have now one of our very favorite guests. Not at all, as I said, from Slovenia. I think if I'm remembering right, this guy is from So I think David Griscom is from Montana or Connecticut.
Have you ever seen the King of the Hill, where Hank Hill basically is confronting his wife about the fact that she's from Montana, and he takes her to see the Alamo, and she's is all unheartened because she sees that there's all these different flags of all the other states that fought and died in the Alamo. She's like, oh, look, there's all these other places you could be from and be a Texan. He's like, well, I don't see Montana up there.
Oh, that's fantastic. So David is, of course, the co-host of Left Reckoning with a good friend, Matt Leck. Mm-hmm. And you can see many segments from for the first several months of this show of Dave talking about country music. However, the thing that I brought him on to do now might like stretch our friendship to the breaking point, which is to watch some Prager U videos.
I know you're taking me down your dark path, Ben. I always say I've been pretty immune for most of it. I mean, even working with Michael for all these years, like Matt and Michael were the ones who watched like the Rubin clips and they present them to me live. I spend no time with this at all. So yeah, you're forcing me to do something I don't really like to do very much.
All right. So the first one has to do with the legacy of the person who PragerU, of course, regards as our greatest and most important president, who would be Ronald Wilson Reagan. So this is called Leo and Layla's Adventures with President Ronald Reagan.
Hey, Leo.
Hey, Layla.
Why are you pulling down our neighbor's fence?
Today, this is not a fence.
Oh, yeah? Then what is it?
It's the Berlin Wall, and I'm Ronald Reagan, our 40th president.
And I guess that means you're here to tear down the Berlin Wall?
You got it. I'm gonna set the East Berliners free.
Leo, I'm pretty sure that our neighbors aren't from East Berlin.
Well, they are today.
Whatever you say, Leo.
Did you know that Ronald Reagan was one of our most popular presidents?
Of course I knew that.
And did you know he was California's governor before he was president?
Well, duh. Did you know that he started out as an actor? He starred in over 50 movies.
Yeah, and he wasn't just an actor either. He was in the military during World War II.
You know what? He was actually great at a lot of stuff. He played college football.
He was also on the swim team.
He ran track, too.
Plus, he was student body president.
And he was totally handsome.
Ew, gross.
What the heck, Leo?
Boy, I sure wish I could have met Ronald Reagan.
Well, why can't you?
Because he passed away in 2004 when he was 93 years old. I wasn't even born yet, and now I'll never get to meet him.
Geez, Leo, don't be so dramatic. We can just use my new time travel app to go meet him.
Really? Awesome.
You just tap here and away we go. But let me get the settings right before you do that.
Ronald Reagan, here I come.
Oh no!
Wow, is this what West Berlin looks like? Layla, look at that wall. It's huge. Hey, wait, where's Layla?
What the heck? Where am I? Oh, great. Thanks, Leo. I better go find him.
I can't believe I actually went back in time. Maybe I'll really get to meet Ronald Reagan.
Did someone say my name?
Wow, you're really President Reagan. Nice to meet you. I'm Leo, and I came here from the future. What are you doing here?
Nice to meet you, Leo. I'm here in Berlin to stop the communists and end the Cold War.
Oh, man. All this talk about communists is making me hungry.
Well, Leo, communism makes everyone hungry. People living under communism are often poor and don't have enough money for food. That's why we have to stop it.
I guess you're right, but can we have a snack first? I brought jelly beans.
Leo, thank you. That's my favorite snack.
It's too bad Layla isn't here to have some too. Hey, Mr. Reagan, can I ask you some questions?
Of course you can, Leo.
Why did they build the Berlin Wall in Germany?
That's a good question. We're in West Berlin, which is the free side of Germany. On the other side of the wall is East Berlin, which is occupied by the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union, which is communist, built this wall during the Cold War to keep people locked in East Berlin and stop them from going to freedom in West Berlin.
We sure are lucky to be on this side.
You're right about that, Leo.
Why is it called the Cold War anyway? It doesn't seem that cold.
It's not because of cold weather. It's called the Cold War because we were able to end the war without using any weapons.
A war with no shooting or bombs? How did you do that?
Well, everyone was afraid that the United States and the Soviet Union were going to nuclear bombs at each other. But thankfully, that never happened.
A nuclear bomb would have been terrible. That's a big...
Okay, I'll go along with the last claim. A nuclear bomb would have been terrible. But I do want to just clock that the thing that this extremely convincing portrayal of Ronald Reagan just said before that was that he won the Cold War without using any violence. So my history is a little rusty, David. Is that true that the Reagan administration didn't do anything Cold War related and violent?
Well, ask the Sandinistas. I mean, the entire history of the Cold War, but particularly under Reagan, is just rationing up tensions and just brutal bloodshed in the name of stamping out communism. I do just want to note, though, there is something in this video that has been really interesting to me so far, which is you can just see how much Donald Trump has sort of permeated the party. I mean, that's a very, very orange Reagan, right? And even their favorite boy now has to be a little bit more Trump-esque.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, this is like just amazing revisionist history. I mean, if you think about everything the United States was doing in the 1980s, it was, funneling guns and money into the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, which included a really the sort of lunatic fundamentalist faction of that, those forces who kind of became the Taliban, who I think one of their war slogans was "They are teaching our women how to read." There were of course the Contras who you mentioned, the terrorists, waging war against the in 1984 democratically elected Sandinista government in Nicaragua, who were massacring nuns and mining mining the harbors in Nicaragua, not to mention being very involved in the drug trade, going back and forth between Central America and the United States, El Salvador. I think quite a few shots were fired by quite a few people with, at the very least, funding from the Reagan administration.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, this is extremely revisionist. I mean, it's no, accident that this is a cartoon. I also wanted to add, not being too nitpicky about the kind of Reagan lore here, but it is amazing how he's been able to get away with this claim that he was the one who ended the Cold War, right? Or that he was the one who was president when the Berlin Wall fell, because he wasn't. It was Bush, his successor, when the wall went down. I mean, of course, events happened before it, but it's just one of those things where it's like in the American popular imagination, Reagan gave a great speech, and then everybody was just like, "All right, we're fucking taking this thing down right now."
Yeah, the head of the DDR, Eric Honecker, heard Reagan's speech and felt ashamed, and was like, "Okay, all right, tear down the wall." That is actually really amazing that Bush had been president for a year with
about 9 months or something. It was November.
And then the next year was the coup against Gorbachev, and the Soviet Union dissolved it shortly afterwards. And okay, sure, you could say, if you have a worldview such that this is a good thing, which I think given the apocalyptic level of social breakdown in some of those countries, after the end of the Cold War, can certainly be disputed. But if you do, I think it's a good thing, and you're looking to assign credit and prizes for it. Okay. Sure. So Reagan, Reagan was president for 2 terms before that. You could say, but then I don't know, Carter was for 4 years before that, and Ford and Nixon, and they don't get any of it. And I'm pretty sure if the same amount of time had elapsed since Reagan had taken office and the Berlin Wall did fall on his watch, and then the dissolution of the Soviet Union, all the people who credit Reagan for that would not be giving credit to Jimmy Carter.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Reagan is just, I think time obviously helps the myth as well. Reagan is just, he gets to embody all the hopes and dreams of the Republican Party. It doesn't really matter how much truth there is to it. I will just add 2 things. One thing is a program note, maybe one day it might be fun to watch, but Werner Herzog.
Yeah,
he has a really interesting documentary on Gorbachev that you can watch. I would say it's a little maybe revisionist. He really, really, really likes Gorbachev, but it's a fascinating film. It could be fun for a movie night sometime.
For sure.
But 2, just the way that this is even presented, right? And we don't have to go through the litany of all the problems with the Soviet Union, etc., right? But that it got to this point because of the Soviets were just against freedom, and America was just over here just please give freedom a shot. It's just such BS, right? I mean, these were extensions of warlike aspirations from the United States, right? The United States was trying to topple that system pretty much from the get-go after the end of World War II, right? And you don't create a happy, perfect system in those conditions, right? The United States is destabilizing you, right? I don't know. It's just the way that it's presented is so ahistorical, obviously. But I think it's wrong itself too, even in the moment of Reagan and Gorbachev having these kind of conversations, because there was a desire on the Soviet side to sort of break down these tensions and to be able to be a part of the global community, quote unquote, right? And that's what led in a lot of ways to the end of the Soviet Union, was this attempt at trying to do it. And of course, once they reopen and they try to have free and fair elections there, the United States didn't want that either, because it was never about democracy or free and fair elections for the United States. It was about the destruction and the eradication of communism and full-scale capitalist plunder of the Soviet system.
Yeah, before World War II, Woodrow Wilson literally sent troops to the Soviet Union, to aid the White Army in the Civil War. I agree. I think that the U.S., and generally, the capitalist world's response is definitely has to be in the mix of factors that led to that system evolving the way that it did, with all of its obvious flaws. But also, there's some tension between this and the video that we watched earlier with Ed and Jake, because, like, I think PragerU also can't decide how they feel about that, because it's like, okay, did the Soviet Union just collapse of the contradictions of its system, or was it the Reagan speech? Right? Like,
exactly. I mean, that's the true like materialist versus idealist tension, right, man?
No, exactly.
The good speech ends the system versus the system ending itself.
Exactly. All right, let's keep going.
Biggest kind of bomb there is.
You're absolutely right, Leo. That's why we signed the INF.
Oh, I see. Wait, what's the INF?
The INF stands for Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. Both our countries agreed to sign the treaty so we didn't have to use our bombs.
Is that all it took to end the Cold War?
Well, no, Leo. We also used our economy to win.
Economy? Isn't that money stuff? It sounds really complicated.
It's really very simple, Leo. We used a program called Reaganomics to make our economy strong. We cut taxes so that the government took less of people's hard-earned money away from them, and that led to more people getting jobs.
Ugh, I don't want a job. I hate work. My sister Layla has a job after school, but I like to play after school.
Well, Leo, when you grow up, getting a job and working hard is part of being responsible. I'm sure your sister is working hard to find you right now. Thanks to everyone working hard, the United States economy was so big that the Soviet Union couldn't keep up.
You are amazing, Mr. Reagan. You saved everyone's lives and made them better at the same time.
Well, thank you, Leo, but the job isn't done yet. We still have one more thing to do. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Yeah, freedom
look,
for
you did it.
There you are, Leo. I've been looking for you everywhere. What have you been up to?
Hi, Layla. You just missed it. President Reagan and I tore down the real Berlin Wall.
Ugh, I can't believe I missed it. You need to be careful when you time travel. My phone battery is almost empty and we need to get back before it's too late.
Okay, Layla. Let me say goodbye to Ronald Reagan first, though. Bye, Mr. President. It was nice meeting you. Thanks for beating the communists.
Goodbye, Leo. And remember this, it's never too late to fight for freedom.
Here we go, Leo.
Yay, we're back! Layla, you should have been there when Ronald Reagan told them to tear down the Berlin Wall. It was super fun.
It's okay, Leo. I got to do a lot of fun things in the past, too.
Like what?
Glad you asked, Leo. Well, I went to the White House and met Nancy Reagan, the First Lady, and I learned all about their program to keep kids off drugs.
Just say no.
You got that right. Plus, I went to the Supreme Court and visited one of my role models, Justice Sandra Day O'Connor.
Who was that?
She was the first woman on the Supreme Court. She's proof that anyone can become what they want in America. And guess who appointed her?
I have no idea.
I'll give you a hint. He really likes jelly beans.
Ronald Reagan did that too? Man, I'm so glad I got to meet him. Hey, Layla, do you think that I could grow up to be like Reagan?
Of course you can. When Ronald Reagan was your age, his family didn't even have plumbing or running water. But you'll have to work hard if you want to be like him.
You bet I will.
Great. Now why don't you start by fixing that fence before Mom and Dad get home?
I really like that what they had Layla do was meet the women off screen. It's like, I don't know. She's off doing some women shit. Don't worry about it.
Oh yeah, exactly. Because it's a side note for them anyway, right? It's just it's like a little arrow in their quiver to, yeah. Because it's like the kind of like gender arguments for Reagan are ridiculous on the merits, but for them, like they just want to use them as a little rhetorical evasion. Yeah.
All right. Well, of course, that was that was PragerU, talking about somebody they do like, but to get a full sense of their educational offerings, we should watch them talk about somebody they don't like. There's also a PragerU educational video about Karl Marx.
Oh, this is gonna be good.
Yeah.
Is it? I mean, I would imagine. Yeah. Oh, here we go. Oh man, I need the cartoons to really get it.
Ideas have consequences. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, and sometimes catastrophic, like the ideas of Karl Marx. Born in Trier, Germany in 1818, Marx didn't invent communism, but it was on his ideas that Lenin and Stalin built the Soviet Union, Mao built communist China, and innumerable other tyrants, from the Kims in North Korea to the Castros in Cuba, built their communist regimes. Ultimately, those regimes and movements calling themselves Marxist murdered about 100 million people and enslaved more than 1 billion. Marx believed that workers, specifically those who did manual labor, were exploited by capitalists, the people who owned, as Marx put it, the means of production, specifically factories, but who did very little physical labor themselves.
Can we pause?
Only a workers' revolution.
Yeah.
This is just like a meta comment. There's nothing that drives me crazier than listening to people who, like, I know are about to present like a very skewed view of Marx and Marxism, right? Whenever they use the phrase like means of production, right? It's like that kind of like keyword understanding, right? Like there's a few things about Marx. It's like, you know, invented communism or didn't invent communism, wrote the Communist Manifesto, and this whole thing is about the means of production. Anyway, I noticed that from like the critics, they say that terminology way more than I ever hear anybody who's like an actual Marxist talking about.
That's true. Like, yeah, you really get the sense that it's one of, like, you know, like they've got a little index card and it's like, this is like one of like 5 things about Marx they have written down the index card.
They love that shit. Those communists, they love those means of production, baby.
Marx wrote in Das Kapital could correct
That's
this
another one
injustice.
too, Das Kapital.
What would that revolution look like? Marx and his collaborator, Friedrich Engels, spelled it out point by point in the Communist Manifesto. It included the abolition of property and inheritance and the centralization of credit, communication, and transport in the hands of the state, and a lot more along the same lines. In other words, the state owns and controls pretty much everything. This notion was widely discussed and debated in European intellectual circles during Marx's lifetime. But nothing much came of it until Vladimir Lenin took power in Russia in 1917. This changed everything. Despite its repeated economic failures, Lenin's Russia, which became known as the Soviet Union, became the model for dictators around the world. Wherever Marx's ideas were practiced, life got worse. Not by a little, but by a lot. There is not a single exception to this rule.
That's insane.
Not the Soviet Union, not Eastern Europe, not China, not North Korea, not Vietnam, not Cuba, not Venezuela, not Bolivia, not Zimbabwe. Wherever Marxism goes, economic collapse, terror, and famine follow. So if cataclysmic failure, meaning terrible human suffering, is the inevitable legacy of Marxism, why do so many people, and now especially young people, defend it? The most common answer Marxism's advocates offer is that they, whoever they are, Lenin, Stalin, Chavez, never really practiced Marxism. They all somehow got it wrong. Marxism, we are told, is, at its essence, about sharing what we have, from each according to his ability to each according to his needs, as Marx put it. Maybe that sounds good to you, but what does it mean? Who determines ability? Who determines need? The answer is the state, the ruling elite. Under Marxism, that's who has all the power. That's why the truth is this. Marxist dictators like Lenin, Mao, and Pol Pot really did get Marxism right. They wanted absolute power, and Marxism gave them the way to get it. Karl Marx never had to face the consequences of his theories. He lived most of his adult life breathing the free air of London, England, living off the generosity of his collaborator and patron, Engels, who, as it happens, inherited his money from his wealthy merchant father. Marx spent his days in the reading room of the British Museum, researching and writing. Although he was obsessed with the term scientific, he was never able to marshal data to prove his theories. There's a good reason for this. There was no data to prove his theories. For all his time in the library, Marx couldn't find any evidence to suggest that capitalism, the free exchange of goods and services through privately owned business, was a passing phase. Throughout the industrial age, working conditions constantly improved and wealth expanded. Marx had to rely on outdated reports to make his case. And even then, he had to manipulate the data to get it to conform to his predetermined theories. But Marx really had no interest in proving his theories. He knew that they could be put into practice only by brute force. He said so himself. Of course, in the beginning, communism cannot be effected except by means of despotic inroads, he wrote. His ends could be attained only by the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. All existing social conditions. That's religion, family, personal possessions, freedom, and democracy. They all had to go in order to achieve Marx's vision of an earthly paradise. But since few people give up their liberties and property voluntarily, creating a Marxist state has always required guns, prisons, and summary executions. Marx's many disciples from Lenin on never considered this a problem. Some, like revolutionary poster boy Che Guevara, considered it a bonus. I don't need proof to execute a man, Che is said to have boasted. I only need proof that it's necessary to execute him. If you're still a fan of Marxism after all the death, suffering, and destruction it's caused, that's your right. But own up to it. Don't hide behind the "it's never really been tried" line. It has. I'm Paul Kengor, professor of political science at Grove City College for Prager University.
My man's bringing back the Caesar haircut over there.
Yeah, I thought it, like when they were going through, so I mean, there are two things here, right? One is that like almost nothing, like there are like 45 seconds on Marx in this video, but most of it's about the
and also for accusing him of not using enough data. Almost nothing I saw there was cited or any form of proof to any of their claims. But keep going.
Yeah, right. No, for sure. I mean, like there was, because like there were a lot of claims there that like are not like general knowledge. Everybody would agree to, things that would have been nice to see a little bit, right? The claim that there's nothing in the 3 volumes of Capital that that counts as data, or maybe there was, but it was manipulated. In what way, we don't really know. Yeah. But also, like half of it, like most of it, more than half, was on the 20th century communist states. Mm-hmm. There was no, I mean, there was this kind of mention of Marxists, who didn't like, who criticisms of them, but they don't really say why, right? You're left in the dark about what the criticisms were. And also, as they were going through the list of the states and said, it totally made things worse here, and here, I kept thinking, man, do they have the balls to include Cuba in that list? Because that would be something, right? Like, say that, pre-1959 to the decades after, that healthcare and infant mortality and doctor-patient ratio and literacy, like that. It's like, racial integration. It's like, nope, nothing good happened in Cuba. They completely would have been better off if Batista instead.
I mean, yeah. Yeah, and that's the underlying argument too. I mean, could you imagine a continuation of, Tsarism in Russia having been, a positive experience for folks? I mean, to say what they're saying, I think is ridiculous. Specifically about, China, Russia, and Vietnam.
Especially like, okay, so China, and this does actually put it in pretty sharp relief, like the issue with this, because like they don't consider it even as a possibility that anything that was done in any of these states differed from the original politics of Marx or Marxism. So fine, let's play by that rule, right? Whatever happened in any self-declared communist state totally aligns, with what Marx advocated. Great. So that would include like China in the last 40 years, right?
Yeah.
And if so, right, like that is, just in terms of rapid economic development, people going from, living in peasant huts to modern apartments, like that's probably the greatest success story for that in the history of the world. In a really weird hybrid system that we would have tons of criticisms of, no doubt, but like also, I mean, I don't know, why doesn't that count?
Yeah, no, I mean, But this is what they do, and I mean, I would imagine many of the people watching this are like sympathetic, to our views on Marx and Marxism and this history. But why do they do this tactic, right? I'm, for one, I'm not somebody who's afraid to talk about the Soviet Union or China, and I will go toe to toe with all these guys about this kind of stuff, right? But they do it to distract from Marx and Marxism, because what immediately happens for people like us, we immediately get into this kind of conversation where we're sort of forced to like defend 100 years of social movements and conflict in different societies, right? Which is a difficult position, and also, to be in, like, just like on a on this on the scale of the argument is like too big, right? But it's just an impossible conversation to have on any meaningful level, right? And so what they really do is they kind of disrupt the fundamental truths as to why Marx and Marxism are attractive to people, right? Primarily by exposing the fundamental flaw and lie of capital society, right? Which is that you are free. One of the things that was and I think you and I both agree on this, like Communist Manifesto is a really incredible text, right? Because it exposes both what's happening to people on the shop floor, right? How their wages are how they are being exploited. They're not getting paid for the work that they're putting into, into production. And then when they leave, they are then preyed upon by the landlord, the shopkeeper, I can't remember the other folks who are coming after these, 19th century workers, right? But it's basically exposing this fact that under capital society, you are getting exploited at the job, and then you leave, and then because of all these other things that are made to be extremely expensive, things that used to be publicly controlled or free, right, or have now been enclosed, right, are now private property that you have to buy or rent from somebody. By exposing that, Marx, it reveals this fundamental inequity of capitalism, right? Which is that if you're a worker, oh boy, it's going to be really, really hard to get ahead. And if you're somebody who owns things, this system is designed to benefit you, right? And what Marx does with that truth is he turns it into a political question instead of just an economic question. And that's why he is somebody who, is extremely important, then and today. And that's why they try to do everything, even in that video, to avoid like dealing with like the fundamental like points of Marxism and like why Marx is an attractive thinker to folks, and instead try to focus on like, oh, well, these are the excesses of this criticism, right? So like, again, I'm somebody who will, talk and really wrestle with like the truths and the reality of like the Soviet Union and China with folks. So I'm not afraid of those conversations. But like, what's really important though is that they're trying to prevent you from taking that analysis that Marx was writing then to a contemporary society today.
Yeah, right, absolutely. And I think it's also really telling that they trot out the means of production at the beginning.
But that's all. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you again. If you're just somebody who just is casually like, I don't know, bumping around ideas and hearing about Marxism, right? Those are the terms. It's like, means of production, and then basically the workers are being abused, right? And there's no it doesn't ever go beyond there, right? And most people, they're just how we are, right? We just sort of have surface level understandings of things. And PragerU exists not to debunk those kind of surface level understandings, but to try to cement them, right? To get like some professor of political science on here to tell them, it's like, hey, your half-assed ideas about what Marx and Marxism are actually true, right?
Yeah, right. And so also though, the means of production come up for a minute at the beginning, but then like kind of forget about it. It's like, okay, so what did Marx thought should be done with these means of production? You wouldn't know for this video, right? No. You just knew. All it really tells you is that Marx advocates some kind of change or another and thinks it's going to have to be implemented by force and violence, which sounds bad. I do really like the Communist Manifesto, although I also wish that someday one of these guys would read a second thing by Marx. Critiquing the Goth program maybe would be nice, or like that would also take you a whole hour. But one way that like the fact that it is just like these sort of vague nuggets, and maybe they skim through the Communist Manifesto, It's like, yeah, right. So in 1848, when continental Europe was entirely ruled by various, kings and emperors, and Great Britain had some quasi-democratic processes, but also the great majority of the, certainly the working class population didn't have the vote. Then, yeah, his position was that, like violent, like insurrectionary tactics were the only way that you could overthrow that system at that time. But also there are tons of places in the 1880s and 90s, when Marx and then Engels, say things like, yeah, in advanced capitalist democracies where workers have the vote, like Great Britain, you could have socialism come about by a socialist party, winning power electorally. Now, they did worry that capitalists would respond to that the way that slave owners responded to the election of Lincoln, which, I think the 20th century shows not an unreasonable concern, see Salvador Allende. But like, that's an incredibly misleading characterization of their, I think that it's complicated. I think they said a lot of different things over the course of their lifetime about transition to socialism and how that works. It's not always obvious how to fit it together, but certainly this is like a two-dimensional cartoon caricature of that.
Yeah, I think like what's frustrating and like maybe it might seem to some people like why you and I are tiptoeing around things is because there are so many raging debates amongst like Marxists and socialists on these things that you don't want to sit here and be like, this is the definitive thing that like Marx said or Marx meant, right? Which is why it's so amazing to watch these guys say it so clearly. But it's like one of those things where you almost have to just like treat it all surface level like they do, right? I'm amazed that they didn't say, for example, dictatorship of the proletariat, because that's a favorite one they used for.
I think that would make it onto the index card.
What?
You'd think that would make it onto the index card.
Oh, absolutely. And I would just say, like, in that context, consider like what the opposite reality is, right? When Marx is talking about the dictatorship of the proletariat, he's talking about, society working for working people, working for the proletariat. He compared like, and to consider that, like, think about what we live under right now. We live under the dictatorship of the bosses. You live under the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. Like, look at what just happened in this pandemic, for example, right? The pipes of money that were coming from the federal government, they just don't flow to everyday people in the way that they did to like major corporations and banks and things like that, right? Because this entire system, from property law, to just like stimulus in general, functions in a way to benefit that class, right? And like that's what they're talking about when they're talking about like smashing the state or like just upending everything that exists, right? Because it's this fundamental understanding that Marx has that these things didn't all develop by like accident to work out this way. It's a kind of recognition that these things developed with the very specific goal in mind, which was to exploit working people as much as you can get away with and still have a functional society.
No, totally. And I think also, dictatorship of the proletariat is one of those things that it's an expression that Marx and Engels over thousands of pages used like 3 or 4 times, maybe.
Yeah, exactly, that's true.
A little more if you include the letters, maybe, but like not much more. And yeah, I think like trying to break apart exactly what that what that phrase meant to them. That's like something that. If we were Marx scholars, we could sit here and have an argument about that for the next 2 hours, but like one thing that you definitely, because again, it's ambiguous. There's room for, just like there's tons of room for disagreement. But also though, one big clue is that they did actually point to one actually existing thing as an example of what a dictatorship of the proletariat would look like in a transitional post-revolutionary society. And that was the Paris Commune, which was not like proto-Stalinism, was actually ultra-democratic. That like the things, if you read The Civil War in France, another very short Marx pamphlet, could read it in an afternoon. But if you read The Civil War in France, the things that Marx praises about the Paris Commune are that that they made every state official recallable by their constituents at any time for any reason. Could make more salary. except, and there were abandoned factories that were turned over to workers' associations to run as cooperatives, presumably, and so it seems like the features that appeal to them about the commune are kind of the opposite of the scare story that people get when they hear that phrase, the dictatorship of the proletariat.
Yeah, I think that's I think that's 100% on point, and I would also add, to all of this as well, because we've just sort of honed on a couple of things, and Marx is like the other fundamental distinction too that Marx does, again, that they're not going to interact with in that kind of video, is like the fundamental reality that we live in a class-based society, and in fact that classes are how most of human history has been sort of governed. Not entirely. That's something that I think a lot of people misunderstand. But if you look at a society and you look at the different classes that have developed in it, you're going to have a good understanding, at least, as to where the conflicts are in that society, and can maybe see in which direction that they're going, right? And that's like the kind of like understanding of history. Again, it's just a refusal to deal with Marx. I mean, I always like, and I know you like Hitchens as well, in the sense that it's kind of, as a complicated figure. I always sort of liked, Hitchens saying that, like, even not believing in like the potential of socialism or communism, that he would still consider himself to be a Marxist, right? Because it's like a way of analysis and viewing the world.
There's actually a place, in fact, during the worst period of Hitchens' politics, which makes it like all that much funnier to see it show up there. There's an exchange that he had with Norman Finkelstein in like 2004, where he actually like brings up there, like it's sort of an aside, but he's like, no, I mean, I still believe in the Marxist theory of history, and he even like mentions like the G.A. Cohen book, Karl Marx's theory of history and defense. And, it's like, no, I mean, I think this is an accurate tool for understanding, how history works.
So amazing.
Even if I no longer think that it's a viable, political program, what he thought about that is ambiguous, but yeah, no, for sure. And he actually also has a really good essay. I think it's inarguably about like Marx's career as a journalist. That's just an aside, but I'd really recommend.
That is a great essay. I remember that one.
Yeah, but yeah, I think it's the one where he says like, journalists like talk about writing the first draft of history. Karl Marx is perhaps the only one who ever really did. Fun fact, by the way, most people don't know this. The very first book with Christopher Hitchens' name on the cover.
I don't.
Okay, 1971. It's called Karl Marx on the Paris Commune, and it's on the 100th anniversary of the Commune. It's like a collection of his writings about it. Hitchens wrote the introduction. So there you go. Like fun, bizarre fact. It took me like the longest time when I was writing that book to like it's not on,
Are we able to get a copy?
I was eventually able to get it by interlibrary loan and then like copy and scan it. But like that's what it took. That thing is beyond out of print. It's not on any of the book sharing websites, but yeah, all right. So it's been fun talking about Christopher Hitchens and Karl Marx, but the last video I want to watch is about perhaps the greatest and most important philosopher who's ever lived. Jake, we have this fired up. There we go.
Oh Lord.
Who is John Galt? This is one of the most famous questions in modern literature. Even today, over 50 years after it was written, you'll hear people asking it. Why? Because it recalls the riveting suspense story, heroic characters, and powerful ideas portrayed in the best-selling novel Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. Born in St. Petersburg, Russia on February 2nd, 1905, Rand became one of the most celebrated authors and philosophers of the 20th century. Her most famous novels, The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, still sell hundreds of thousands of copies every year around the world. Rand lived through the early years of the Russian Revolution, saw her father's pharmacy business confiscated by the Bolsheviks, and experienced the horrors of communism firsthand. She longed to emigrate to America. In 1926, she did, and never looked back. To Rand, the United States meant freedom. She saw the founding fathers as heroes. They created a country based on individual rights, man's right to his own life, to his own liberty, to the pursuit of his own happiness, she said, means that every individual has a right to exist for his own sake, neither sacrificing himself to others, nor sacrificing others to himself, nor to the government. The practical results of the American system, Rand said, could be seen in the skyline of New York City. America's skyscrapers, she noted, were not built by public funds nor for a public purpose. They were built by the energy, initiative, and wealth of private individuals for personal profit. And instead of impoverishing the people, these skyscrapers, as they rose higher and higher, kept raising the people's standard of living. Rand advocated pure capitalism, which she described as a system in which the government acts only as a policeman that protects men's rights. No bailouts, no special favors for big business, no government intervention into the economy. When people are free to produce and trade, and when the government is limited to protecting rights, everyone benefits. Individuals thrive, societies prosper. How do we know this? Compare freer, more capitalist societies to less free, more statist ones. In Rand's day, America compared to the Soviet Union, West Germany to East Germany, more recently, South Korea to North Korea, Colombia to Venezuela. Such differences were painfully obvious to Rand. So were their causes. In Atlas Shrugged, she showed how easily a free society can collapse into a dictatorship. The heroine, Dagny Taggart, works tirelessly and brilliantly to save her family's railroad business, while ever-increasing government interventions destroy businesses and crush the economy. Meanwhile, one by one, the top producers across various industries mysteriously disappear. No one knows where they have gone. The only clue is a question they leave behind. Who is John Galt? As the economy crumbles, how do politicians, bureaucrats, and academics react? They blame the greedy businessman and decry the profit motive and free markets. Their solution? More government intervention, which of course only makes the problem worse. Sound familiar? Atlas Shrugged is a cautionary tale about pursuing equality over excellence, state control over free markets, but it's also about the power of the individual and the power of reason. The individual's reason in mind, Rand argued, is his tool of knowledge, his only means of understanding what is true or false, how the world works, what is good or bad for his life. This is the theme of Rand's work more broadly. In order to thrive, to achieve happiness, the individual must think for himself and live by the judgment of his own mind. To do this, people must be free to voluntarily exchange ideas, goods, and services for mutual benefit, free to speak their minds without fear. For this, she regarded capitalism not only as the best, but as the only moral social system. Capitalism does not tell men to suffer, but to pursue enjoyment and achievement, she argued. Capitalism does not preach passivity, humility, resignation, but independence, self-confidence, self-reliance. Above all, Rand emphasized, capitalism does not permit anyone to expect or demand the unearned. Is this the system America lives under now? No, said Rand. She called capitalism the unknown ideal because it has never been fully implemented, even in America. Ayn Rand's ideas on capitalism, individualism, and reason have attracted millions of people to her novels, essays, and lectures, and still do. Who is John Galt? I'm Gloria Alvarez with the Objective Standard Institute for Prager University.
This video. That's awesome, man.
Yeah, one of my favorite things about this, I'm going to point this out in the chat, is, okay, so they said that Rand immigrated to the United States in 1926, And, there's all this prose poetry about these skyscrapers, she saw when she was getting there, the glories of, this private profit system. This is 3 years before, the 1929 and the beginning of the Great Depression.
Yeah. No, that is pretty on point. And like people forget too, like not to open up the Bitcoin thing here, but whenever I warn people about some of the kind of excesses of that, I remind them that like when the stock market crashed here in the US, like you could read, like you can find them like old newspaper articles, and it's just advertisements like buy stocks, like no downside, like only wealth, right? And like the problem was with that is like too many people, right, are pursuing their own pleasure over anything else, right? Obviously, I don't blame the stock market crash on everyday people just trying to,
Sure.
make a little bit of money. But it's like it shows that kind of ideology, because like what is annoying to me about Ayn Rand and her big defenders is they try to make it seem like it's an egalitarian philosophy, right? Like it's for everybody in the sense that like you can like try to achieve your own greatness. They do admit that only some people will achieve it, but they say the door is wide open for folks, right? But in American capitalism, when we have seen like, these kind of things open up to everyday people, it's too like, honestly, to try to bring in more suckers to buy the shit from you before the thing collapses, right? I know they have their counter arguments as to why they have it, but I'm saying like it's not egalitarian at all, right?
No, it's definitely not, and I think that you get, I think a lot of people who got into Ayn Rand, like, they understood that perfectly well. That's like Ludwig von Mises said, I think like wrote her a letter where he's like, oh, you're great because like you dared to tell people that like they suck and they're terrible, and it's these few captains of industry, who make everything great.
Well, the thing that's ironic about Ayn Rand is like if you look at her as like an ideology, the government to socialize losses in moments of capitalist crisis.
Well, I mean, the most vivid illustration of this is that I think this was actually the very last debunk I did for TMBS before Michael passed away. Is that the beginning of the pandemic? The Ayn Rand Institute actually put its hand out for PPE money.
Yeah.
Like,
this is the thing that like, not to get too like nerdy about this, but this is like people need to understand like that's what the role of the state is in capitalism too, right? Is like to maintain and make sure that the financial system is operating without kinks. And that's something that like capitalists themselves want and they desire. Right. So these kind of ideologies that they try to make to sell they're kind of like naked power grabs. People, you got to treat them like the trash that they are, really.
Yeah. I mean, so I think their excuse for that, which was also Rand's excuse for being willing to go on benefits personally, is that as like a taxpayer who'd been
they're getting their money back.
That she'd paid into the system, which I think it should take about 10 seconds of thought to see that could be a much more general justification for the welfare state. But possibly the best thing about this video is the contrast with the last one we watched, because you'll notice that one of the things that she said is that capitalism has never really been tried, not even in America.
Yeah, I know. I noticed that too. And I mean, that's the fundamental, that's the baseline for these kind of arguments that are coming from Prager U, is they are meant for people who have like extremely short attention spans, right? And it's whatever is the most convenient at the moment. Like they're not trying to build up like one truth, right? Like a true ideology that you can stand on its own, right? It's filled with contradictions because again, it's in the most conservative thought at this point. And I would argue probably historically as well too, is to make the unacceptable seem acceptable, right? To just make clear excesses of class society seem to be natural, and to try to discredit any kind of criticism of the current state of things.
No, exactly. I mean, that's the one of the big threads running through Michael's book Against the Web about how reactionaries always try to either mythologize or naturalize
Yes.
Historically contingent hierarchies. Which, yeah, I mean, Ayn Rand is one of the most extreme versions of that, right? I mean, because it's this like crazy worldview that like even she knows is inconsistent with normal human values.
Can we just say something on that really quick on human values? Because I don't swim in those waters as much anymore about like real true philosophy. But I think Obama's famous line, right, was like you didn't build that, like talking about the roads and all that kind of shit, right? That's the typical like liberal argument against it, right? And fair enough. But I think another example, I think that it's useful to push back against these like pure individualists, is another communal system that we all interact with, which is language, right? Like that's something that is like given to you from the society, from the community, from all the people around you. It allows us to communicate with one another. It's inherently social, and it's something that you cannot replicate on an individual level, right? It's something that you utilize like from the moment that you become verbal, right? Which is really when you enter into society at large, and you can use it, to your advantage for your entire life, right? And it's something that precedes capitalism, of course, right? And shows that as creatures, as like as beings, like we are communal. We need to be in communication with one another. I don't know. Like I can't imagine some kind of like Ayn Rand parent being like, I'm not going to teach my kid like how to speak, right? They need to figure it out themselves.
Yeah, right. It's like you remember the Simpsons episode with where they do the musical version of Streetcar Named Desire. They have the Ayn Rand School for Tots, where they explain that when the baby asks for a pacifier, they're saying I'm a parasite. I won't depend on you. So yeah, there's this obvious disconnect with normal human values, but the whole point of this worldview is to provide some sort of romanticized justification for what otherwise couldn't be justified.
Yeah. And I also just have to, do my good lefty point about the skyscrapers in New York. Not only is it before the collapse, but come on, man. Like that wealth did not just like get developed there through like some people's genius, right? It's like through slavery and through occupation. I mean, South America essentially was turned into an open pit mine. And for people who have not read Open Veins of Latin America, I highly suggest it, because you might recognize that the history is one of like exploitation, but until you really realize what's happened, just like resources and people, what's been stolen from them for centuries upon centuries to create the wealth of both the United States and Europe at large, right? You will recognize that any kind, like if you are to make any kind of historical narrative about the skyscrapers of New York, it's like those are the crowns that have been stolen from the labor of workers across this country, across people who were forced into slavery, and then people who were, had their homes taken from them, and all of the wealth and mineral resources of their communities, literally ripped from the ground. It didn't just come because some guy fucking invented the cotton gin there. You know what I mean? The cotton gin.
Yeah, right. I mean, and Rand's examples were all like hilariously off key like that, like in Atlas Shrugged, right? John Galt, is that's all on a rail, like on train, railroads. And it's like, okay, hold on just a second. In the Ayn Rand utopia, where the government couldn't intervene in the economy in any way, and property rights were sacrosanct, could you even have a railway system?
Oh yeah, no, because it doesn't work.
So any farmer who didn't want to sell, I mean, what would this railroad route look like?
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, for people who aren't familiar, like the U.S. government had to get involved because letting a free market system run that was a complete nightmare, and it was just not going to be able to do what we wanted to do as a society, right? Which was to expand westward. And with all the problems that come with it, obviously, but I'm just saying, like, this was a moment where like the government said, if we want to achieve these kind of social goals and be able to have industry and an economy like that we would like to have, which would be a dominant industrial society, we have to socialize these railroads, because if we just use basic like free market economics on it doesn't work, because it monopolizes way too quickly. The prices get absurd. It's another reason why we have the post office and all these other kind of things.
No, I mean, absolutely, right. I mean, this is what, like, yeah, that Charlie Kirk debate with Assad, watched last week. He makes this big deal saying, like, if markets work everywhere else, you put that aside. Why shouldn't they work in healthcare? It's like, well, I mean, not
they don't work.
All goods are equally elastic, and so, like, there are, if you have a if the coffee shop across the street raises its prices too much, you might not go get coffee there, but you're going to buy your EpiPen no matter what.
I mean, the best example, it's like, rural hospitals, man.
Right.
I mean, it's a great example of how market incentives do not really work out for people. It's just like it's operating from their own world. And I also have to say, like, as someone who lived in New York for a while, when you walk through, I mean, maybe this is FDR, so maybe it's not fair. It doesn't know, like, there are so many monuments back to a time when America was very interested in building public buildings for the use of the people, right? The public libraries and university systems alone. There's a lot actually of things that were done just with the goal of the public good and not just for somebody's profit that are just as beautiful parts of our history and our skyline.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. So I'm going to New York this weekend. It's going to be very strange to be there and without having some David Griscom bar hopping in the weekend. That's gonna that'll go back to your apartment at the end of the night and drink bourbon and listen to country music. That's such a part of my experience in those trips. But a fun fact, by the way, if you haven't seen it, I think we actually might have talked about this before, but for anybody who hasn't seen this, Christopher Hitchens and John Judas actually did a debate in 1986 with two people from the Ayn Rand Institute, which is great.
Oh yeah, it's a phenomenal debate. And while we're throwing things out to people too, I can't remember. Oh, I think I've sent this to you. You debated him. He's God damn it, I can't remember his name.
Brooks.
Yeah. Have you seen his debate with Leo Panitch?
Oh no,
I'll have to send it to you. I think Matt and I did a kind of breakdown of it on our show. We did. I just can't remember if it's for patrons or not, but you can find it. It's Leo Panitch, Yarbrougk, and I can't remember the woman who I believe she's a Tory MP. So basically, it's Leo Panitch versus Jesus Christ Brooks, and this Tory MP. And it's about socialism, right? It's socialism practical. And it's a really, really, really frustrating debate, just in the sense of like the way that it's framed from the get-go is just not going to work. Because the moderator's angry at Panitch, Brooks is just spouting a bunch of bullshit, and the Tory MP is talking about how Ethiopia is not Ethiopia, Nigeria is a socialist country, which Panitch has a good retort in where he says it's hard to imagine a socialist country where Shell is like one of the but anyway, it's a really good debate despite like the interlocutors being terrible, because I think Panitch finds and actually does a really great job at explaining at least how I envision and understand socialism to be, which is that it's not a set of policies, but rather a process, right? Like the policies are certainly part of the process, but it's about building, workplace democracy, workers' power, etc. And it's just thinking about it as a set of like policies that you implement. So it's like, okay, the country's 60% socialist, blah, 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 is really absurd. And that's what they try to make you do a lot, because like a lot of these other ways of viewing the world, being a typical liberal or conservative, like they just are not that dynamic of philosophies compared to Marxism and socialism. Anyway, long-winded, but very, very, very passionate plea for people to watch that debate, because this is a good one.
Yeah, well, I will definitely have to do some kind of breakdown of that. I think I can just Yarbrook, he debated Bhaskar a bunch of times, and I know Bhaskar's got like sort of a weird soft spot for him. But like the time I debated him, like by the end, he was he was accusing me of wanting to take away his television set.
So, I remember that because you were debating him, and I was coming on to do my segment, and I was in the waiting room for a lot longer than I wanted to be. And not only was I in the waiting room for a long time, I was also listening to some fucking asshole like screaming about how you're going to come for your television. His television.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, brother. Got to do this again soon.
Yeah, man. It's good hanging out.
So that was David Griscom. I should check out his and Matt Leck's show, Left Reckoning. We are going to do one more segment before we go to the post game for patrons. So while we were talking about Ayn Rand, let's look at a clip of her talking about Immanuel Kant.
Today, you're supposed to apologize to every naked savage anywhere on the globe because you are more prosperous, because you've earned your money. You have to feel guilty and apologize for it, while he hasn't and doesn't intend to learn from you. He just wants your money. We're being taught. Why are we being taught? Because the ruling philosopher today in Harvard and everywhere else is Immanuel Kant. And that's the real villain of our age. It's not Karl Marx.
You mean he's the one, huh?
He is the one.
Kant is the one. Okay.
It's not Karl Marx, and it's not even religion. So I do not approve of religion, as you know. But those are not the villains. The villains is Immanuel Kant, who preached that man's mind is not valid, that the things you perceive are not there. They're not real. Things in themselves, as he preached, are something which exist in another dimension. Your world is only phenomenal, as he called it, and then there is this noumenal world, which you cannot perceive in any way whatever. And that noumenal world is the true reality. Only you can't perceive it, so you better live here on earth and do your duty. And your duty is some kind of voice that comes from these other dimensions, which you can't know. Well, how does he know? He doesn't tell you, but he tells you that morally you have to do your duty. What does your duty consist of? Of doing things in which you can take no possible interest and no advantage to yourself. You know that he is even worse than an altruist. An altruist would tell you, you shouldn't be happy, but you should sacrifice for other people, and then you're moral. Kant goes beyond it. He says, if you do things because you have any goal whatever, even the welfare of others, your action is not moral. Or as he puts it, it has no moral significance. To be truly moral, you should do things out of which you get nothing whatever, neither for yourself nor for others. You can achieve that kind of being total zero offered for being eaten by any cannibal, then you're moral. Now that's the philosopher who rules today's life. If that is what the universities are preaching, Kant himself and all the endless variations of him and the derivatives from him, all modern philosophy are little illegitimate Kantians, if you know what I mean. If that's what children are taught, once they leave college, what do they bring to life? What you see today. We're kind of reaching the visible climax of Kantianism. They take dope, they try to kill their mind in every way possible. They leave range of the moment, they have no values, no goals, and no selfishness. Well, they're terribly unselfish because I haven't got one independent idea in the world.
The philosophies of the Western world.
All right.
Hey!
That was Ayn Rand. This is a philosophy professor at Georgia State University.
That I am.
Perimeter College, Jennifer Burgis.
Dunwoody campus.
And
I hope that comment about the sad, sad woman, that's not supposed to be me.
I'm pretty sure that was about Ayn Rand.
Okay.
So you seem pretty happy. So this is going to be a new feature. Going to do this during the last 20, 30 minutes of the show before we go to the post game. As yet unnamed philosophy segment, taking suggestions.
I thought it was super awesome, amazing, something. Hi, Silver.
Silver Harlow says, "Oh, look, it's Dr. Burgis and her husband," which is one accurate way to put it. So
that's my favorite way to put it.
So yeah, Ayn Rand really, really dislikes Kant. Kant is the villain.
He's a devil.
Yes.
I can see why somebody could believe that Kant is the devil, but this whole noumenal, phenomenal thing, I don't really see it there so much.
Yeah, that is a very odd thing for her to focus on.
Yeah.
Also, I've got to say, at the risk of being nitpicky, but we are doing the philosophy segment, we could be a little nitpicky, is that I don't
nitpicking. That's what keeps me employed.
Exactly. Get that, sweet tenure track job. So your adjunct / podcaster,
that loser husband of mine
can have health insurance.
Exactly.
So I don't believe, I understand, now, I'm not a Kant scholar, but I do not believe that Kant thought that the noumena, the things themselves, were in a different dimension.
No, I don't remember any of that either.
Yeah.
Also not a Kant scholar, but
yeah,
I don't remember him talking about dimensions.
I'm pretty sure that's wrong. In fact, I'm 100% sure that that's wrong. So the point is the noumena are things as they are themselves, and phenomena are things as they seem to us, and that we can only have knowledge of things as they seem to us. And so there's a certain respect in which if that things in themselves they're not in a different dimension. It's just that we can only know them insofar as they appear to us.
Yeah, which is not really a crazy idea when you start thinking about it. When I bring this up in intro classes, there's usually some, that's true.
Yeah. But also, fun fact about Kant, he did not think that this meant that we can't know anything. And in particular, he certainly didn't think that we can't know anything about morality.
Yeah, that was a whole different business.
Yeah, Kant's view is that, so there's theoretical reason, which is when you're trying to figure out the contents of empirical reality. That's where the whole noumena phenomena thing comes up. But then there's practical reason, which involves both, prudential reasoning, what Kant calls hypothetical imperatives, when you're trying to figure out what you should do in order to rationally advance different goals that you might have, and also categorical imperatives, or actually just the categorical imperative, there only being the one. People who are later listening to this as a podcast and see Jen holding up one finger, But yes, if Kant had said you can't know anything about morality, he certainly would have been talking to Ayn Rand. But she can't know anything about morality, or certainly doesn't seem to. But Kant's position is that we actually can use our reason to figure out the requirements of morality. In fact,
reason.
Yes.
That reason. We have our reason for a reason.
Wow. Yeah, but I mean,
this is the wit that my students look for every day.
So
no Kant jokes. We're not going to get oh boy, there we go.
Yeah, the chat is already full of Kant jokes, of course. There's a webcomic called Existential Comics, where it's a philosophy-themed webcomic, and they've got a little thing at the top where it's like it rolls through. It's like number of days since last cat pun. But yeah, I mean, Kant thinks that morality just is an extension of rationality. That's his view. That if you thought about it enough, you would realize that this is the only, in his view, this is the only internally consistent law you can give yourself. That you're acting freely if you're acting a law that you give yourself. That sounds like something Ayn Rand might sign off on. But the difference is that he thinks there's only one law you could rationally give yourself, which is the categorical imperative. So Kant's position on this, we just heard Ayn Rand describe it in her diatribe about the naked savages who we're supposed to give everything to.
I don't think you can say that anymore. Can you?
I mean,
I think that's politically incorrect now.
Sure. I mean, I'm sure in 1970, whatever, she gave that interview, lots of people found it objectionable then too.
Did they? Did they find things like that objectionable back then?
Some people did, I'm pretty sure. I mean, like the American Indian movement was a big thing in the 1970s. I'm pretty sure that nobody who was involved in AIM was very happy to hear Ayn Rand, rant about the naked savages.
Sure.
But we just heard Ayn Rand say that Kant's view is that it's immoral to do anything that benefits you. Is that actually Kant's view?
No.
Okay, well,
no, it is not.
This is why I brought in the fancy tenure track philosophy professor to set me straight on this thing. So let's hear it.
No, he does not think that. He doesn't think about benefits at all. Actually,
yeah.
All he's concerned about is doing the rational thing. Following the rules. This is why it's called deontology. It's about your duty. This is not a consequence-focused theory of morality.
Yeah, but that does, it's not a consequence-focused theory of morality. Like the good or bad consequences of something aren't what makes it right or wrong for Kant. But that doesn't mean that it's bad to do things that benefit you. In fact, that would be a consequence-based view of morality if it was bad to do things.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And Kant talks in his groundwork for the metaphysics of morals, which is the basic text that we give intro students or intro to ethics students to read. He says explicitly that we should help our fellow man when we can.
Yeah, so he has this view. There are perfect duties, which are things that you have to do all the time, no matter what.
A duty to not kill people.
Yeah,
that is a perfect duty. You must follow it at all times.
Even when you're asleep, you should not be murdering. You should not. You should be, getting up, making your coffee. Don't murder anybody while you do that. Read the newspaper. No murdering during that. You go to work, still no murdering.
And it doesn't matter who you see. You can't murder this guy, this woman. You cannot murder anyone along the way.
Yes.
Oh, Joe, what are you doing to me?
Joe says he doesn't care about the consequences. David Russell says she can't see the point. Yeah, so you have a perfect duty not to murder because you're supposed to be just not murdering 24/7.
Exactly.
But you have imperfect duties, which are things that you that it would be wrong. It would violate the categorical imperative if you never did them.
You have to do them sometimes.
But you don't have to do them
all the time,
constantly. And it's not, there's a particular, you're doing wrong if you don't do it at this particular moment,
it's up to you to pick and choose. You can help this homeless person. You don't have to help every homeless person, but you got to help some homeless.
Yes, if you just
the idea.
Step over homeless people all the time and never once do anything to help, then maybe you're violating the categorical imperative, because he says you have an imperfect duty of benevolence to help your fellow man when you can.
So because it's a duty, it's something that you have to do.
Yeah. So Kant's view, the categorical imperative, there are a few different formulations, but like one of them is the formula of humanity, says never treat humanity, whether in your own person or that of another. Key phrase for the difference between what Ayn Rand says Kant's view is and what Kant's view actually is. Whether in your person or that of another, you can never treat as merely a means to an end. Always has to be an end in itself. Mandatory for a Kant discussion. Gotta do 30 seconds on this. Why is the merely important?
Because you can, in fact, treat someone as a means as long as you are also treating them as an end in themselves.
Yeah, if you ask your friend for a ride to the airport, you aren't violating the categorical imperative.
You are not.
That's fine. If you stick a gun to their head and demand that they give you a ride to the airport,
that's bad.
Then you are, because
you have a perfect duty to not stick a gun to your friend's head and demand a ride to the airport.
Yeah, because that would be treating them merely as a means to an end. In other words, as if they didn't matter. Yeah. That their only significance was as a way of achieving your ends. That's what you're not supposed to do. And in the book that Jen mentioned earlier, which, by the way, I used to quote this in syllabi because he has a line in there about how basically he says, look, I could make this simpler, but then it wouldn't be real philosophy. It would just be idle coffeehouse chatter.
Only you would put a Kant quote in your syllabus.
So I was like look, there are a lot of hard readings in this class, but do you want philosophy or do you want idle coffeehouse chatter? Come on. In that book, he gives a few different examples of things that people could do to violate the categorical imperative. In fact, he gives 4 examples of that. And this idea that Ayn Rand often has that, well, her view is that you should devote yourself to your own flourishing, and everybody else, the Kantians, the utilitarians, everybody.
It's all about me.
Yeah.
Oh, I like it.
But she thinks everybody else, the Kantians, the utilitarians, all those devils are all those villains are.
Wait, they're all devils?
I think. Well, Kant is the devil,
right?
But
is Mill also a devil?
Well, I don't know if he's a devil, but I think she thinks he's very bad.
He's a lesser demon.
Maybe a lesser demon, yeah. That she thinks that all these other philosophies are saying that you should just deny yourself and only do things to help others and not tend to your own flourishing at all. And if you have this dichotomy, then her view starts to sound less sociopathic and ridiculous and more like, oh, okay, well, that sounds better than just like, having to be 100% self-sacrificing all the time. But these 4, utilitarians don't think that you should never do things for yourself. I mean, you should. I mean, if that's what's going to lead to more happiness existing in the world.
We've been going over this in my intro to ethics class today, actually.
Yes.
About how the utiles you maximize might be your own.
Right, exactly. And Kant, in the groundwork of the metaphysics of morals, he gives 4 examples of things that people could do that would violate the categorical imperative, and 2 of them are violations of duties to yourself. One of them is a man who's considering killing himself because he no longer finds satisfaction in life, which Kant thinks violates your duty to preserve your own life.
His reasoning is a little, it's something. He really goes wrong there with some definitions and some reasoning, but that's not the point. That is neither here nor there right now. But the point he makes is that, no, you cannot do this. Yeah, and that's, again, it's a violation of duty to yourself. That would be an example of not treating humanity in your own person as an end in itself. According to Kant, I think even a lot of people who like lots of aspects of Kant's philosophy today think that maybe he, his view on, euthanasia, assisted suicide, there are tons of criticisms you can make there. But the point is, this is one of his 4 examples. So clearly he thinks
that you should, in fact.
Yeah, I mean, that's not really what we're here to do, is criticize his examples, although I did have to throw that out. But the idea is to show that, yes, this is a thing that he argues for.
Yeah.
Hey, J. Andrew.
Another one of his examples is a man who doesn't develop his own talents, which Kant also thinks violates the categorical imperative, because if you're just, being driven around by desires and you're not promoting your own excellence, you're not developing your talents, then you're not treating humanity and your own person as a end in itself. And I think that's really where the difference between Rand's caricature of Kant and what Kant thinks gets very, very clear. I think that obviously any version of libertarianism, which is actually not a word Rand likes, but I mean, that's approximately her view, is something I deeply disagree with. I think the less zany libertarian philosophers, some of them have much more positive views of Kant.
The word zany does not come up too much in discussions of Kant. I've done this so many times in class, and no one has ever used the word zany.
Yeah.
Well,
Blue Goop
that's
says,
the problem.
Blue Goop asked, what if my best talent is laziness, though? That would be, earlier we watched a PragerU video where people go back in time to ask Ronald Reagan questions about the Cold War. If you could go back in time and do some Q&A with Kant, that would be one to put on the list there. But I don't know. I mean, I guess I have to say, like I said, you're the fancy tenure track, professor.
I'm the one with the job.
Yeah. I'm the layabout shiftless podcaster, Jacobin columnist, adjunct professor. But so I will defer to you if you have a different take on this. You know better. But I kind of, I don't know. I mean, I've got to say, I came out of this liking Kant better than Ayn Rand.
Wait, liking Kant better than Ayn Rand does, or liking Kant better than you like Ayn Rand? Ayn Rand.
Both.
Both.
I mean, I meant the second one, but yeah, both.
Okay.
Yes, my view is Kant greater than symbol Ayn Rand.
All right. Just trying to get rid of any ambiguity there.
Fair enough. Well,
if you and your partner can relate to us, I don't know what that says about you.
Jay Hutch says, I'm going to show this to my partner. She'll be happy to see a couple we can relate to. Yeah. So this is fun. If you've enjoyed this last 20 minutes, don't worry. You're going to get some more of it.
I'll be back.
Next episode.
Next episode.
And the episode after that.
Absolutely.
So this is fun. We are going to go to the post game for patrons, where yeah, don't engage with that one. We're going to go to the post game for patrons, where Brent Lengel is going to join us, and again, Kelly's off tonight, but Jake is our new producer, is going to tell us his origin story. Very exciting stuff. And of course, and our
wait, I didn't get an origin story.
Well, you can do your origin story on the next episode. Meanwhile, we are going to call it there for the main show and go to the post game. Left is best.
Team Snoopy forever.